Affliction League has been the most rewarding league in the history of Path of Exile, and players have spent the last month or two getting worried about the hangover they're going to experience when the next league doesn't just print Divine Orbs and Mage Bloods. GGG are aware of this too, and it looks like they're heading that problem off before it starts by giving us what may be the single greatest quality of life patch in the game's history. Here's a quick rundown on the quality of life improvements that have been announced so far. Pantheons are account-wide now, but can be toggled off on specific characters if you want to run builds like Self-Chill. You can move all of a stackable item in your inventory at once into a trade window with a single click, so you can trade 1,000 Chaos Orbs and only click one time instead of 50. Socket and quality currency can be used automatically without spam clicking an item. Breach hands open automatically when you walk over them, making breaches substantially easier to clear effectively. Today, GGG dropped the biggest announcement, and it's probably not going to be the last, but it was big enough that I thought I needed to make a video about it. Let's take a look at it now.
Hi, I'm Mark Roberts, Game Director on Path of Exile. In 3.24, the Masters, Alva of Incursion, Nico of Delve, Einhar of Bestiary, and Jun of Betrayal will no longer be mutually exclusive and can appear in the same map.
Alright, being able to do multiple masters in a single map is really good for early currency strategies. It means you could do Einhar and Jun, or Einhar and Alva, or Einhar and Jun and Alva, all at the same time. I like this change a lot.
Speaking of Betrayal, we're making the following changes. The Ashling reward of remove a random modifier, replacing it with the Veiled modifier instead, has been moved to the function of the Veiled Chaos Orb, and has been removed from safe houses.
Reworking the Chaos Orbs, the Veiled Chaos Orbs, is exactly how I thought they would do it, and it's a really good change. Ashling Slams are a fun concept. I really like doing them, but farming one up when you need to craft a piece of gear or trusting somebody else to handle your expensive piece of gear is terrible. So having it just be an itemized currency and be this one that kind of has a similar use that really isn't as good, just changing it right over to that is a brilliant choice. This is better for crafting gear. It makes farming Syndicate Mastermind better, as we'll see here.
Will now exclusively drop from Katarina, the leader of the Immortal Syndicate.
Wow, spoilers for Betrayal.
Powerful, but also allows for full trading of this craft between players and a more clear path to target farming this orb by maximizing your Katarina kills.
So we have some unknowns here. How many does she drop at a time? I mean, first of all, does she even drop Veiled Chaos at all area levels, or does it have to be in high tier, T14 plus maps in order to get Veiled Chaos? Can you just spam white maps to farm her and get Veiled Chaos Orbs? That would be pretty cool. Also, notably, they're called Veiled Orbs now instead of Veiled Chaos, so whatever. What is the drop rate on them? How many does she drop at once? Does the drop rate scale with her item level? Maybe it's a low chance to get one at lower levels and a pretty high chance, or maybe the chance of getting multiple in tier 16 maps. All that is the kind of thing that I really want to explore at the start of the new league. And, doing that and getting a pretty nice crafting currency at the same time as learning stuff sounds pretty fun. Now, this also means something else. What is happening with Ashling rewards in Betrayal if she doesn't generate Veiled Chaos Orbs anymore? Is she getting some other sort of useful currency? Is she just being removed? We don't know about that.
The capability to add higher than 20% quality to weapons, armors, and flasks has been removed from Betrayal, and these reward outcomes have been replaced. Your flasks can now be corrupted by Val Orbs, which will add a random quality value, from -10 to +10. Good luck!
Okay, we have a couple of things to notice here in this little section. First off, what's happening to Bahilic in Betrayal? Is he just being removed? They're certainly removing all of his powers. You can't use him to quality up armor, weapons, or flasks anymore, so the chances that he's being removed, it's, a possibility, or maybe he'll just do some other new stuff that's worth exploring. So that's interesting. They said they would replace ways to increase quality of armor, weapons, flasks to 30%, and then they talked about flasks here. You can vol them to send them up or down by up to 10 quality. Okay, that's interesting and cool. I think that makes the possibility of running a Toxic Rain build with a belt like a Headhunter, where you're not getting any sort of flask effect duration. I think that makes it a lot more available. I mean, any sort of Pathfinder build where you're running like a headhunter or something that's not a flask effect duration belt becomes a lot more viable now, because you can get 30 quality on all your flasks and make them last a lot longer. That is good. But what about the armor and weapon qualities? Perfect Fossils can roll your item quality up, but they can only be used on non-unique items, and they will re-roll the item. So they're not really a technique that works across the board. So is something new coming, or are they just talking about corrupting items and then using tainted currency and also hoping it didn't brick in the first place? I don't know, but I would be curious to find out. Now, notably here, they say flasks can be corrupted up to 30 quality, but elemental resist flasks, if we look here, if we back up just a second or two, as we can see, they've been changed, and they have been nerfed pretty hard. They only grant 40 resist, down from 50, which that's not really the bigger part. The bigger part is that instead of granting 20% less damage taken of that element, they grant 5% maximum resistance of that element. This is a pretty huge nerf. It's kind of a big deal for a lot of Pathfinder builds, especially those that run all 3 elemental res flasks. That is a pretty normal Toxic Rain Pathfinder setup. I'm glad I haven't been using that, because I'm not going to be getting hit as hard. And I think I'm going to actually come through fine with the way that I've had mine set up. I've popped open my path of building on my Toxic Rain Pathfinder that converts, let's take a look here, 50, 62, 60, 69% of physical damage to lightning. Nice. And it uses a Topaz Flask to do, I just kind of want to do a little comparison here. So this is with no Topaz Flask on. I have given myself, in the custom modifiers, I gave myself 10,000 light res just so that I'm currently using a Topaz Flask to fix my resists, and obviously, I don't want that skewing any sort of results here. So this is the, effective health, Fizz max hit, Ellie max hit that I have on this character that is running a Progenesis as a Pathfinder with a lot of flask effect. This is what it would look like if I had, no elemental resist flasks at all. 43k Ellie max hit, 27k Fizz max hit. Not ultra high. All right, so just looking at the config, we don't have any sort of max light res, max fire res going on in there at all. We're going to throw on this Dabbler's Topaz Flask of the Dove, the one that I'm using here, and because I'm using a Mage Blood, and I have a fair amount of increased flask effect from things like Careful Conservationist and these little mana and flask effect nodes, and then from being a Pathfinder. If we look at the calc here, it says under effective flask stats, flask effect modifier 170%. We're also getting that 70% from using an enkindling orb and 25% from the fact that we're using a mage blood and we're using the increased effect, reduced duration prefixes. We're getting 170% increased flask effect on all of our magic flasks in this setup. So 270% total effect, because 100% effect is the normal amount. So if we were to look at the amount of max res that we would get out of the altered Topaz flasks, that's 5% times 2.7. That's 13.5%. Unfortunately, this won't round up. At least I don't think it will. If we were to get to 13.7%, maybe it would round up to 14, but I don't think so. Usually this kind of thing gets truncated. So that means that this would bump you from the base 75 max light res up to, up to 88 max light res, which is pretty decent, but it is not as good as the, 0.2, the 20% less lightning damage taken times 2.7 is 54% less lightning damage taken. That's absurd. That's a massive amount of damage reduction just from that flask, with all of the flask effect obviously being piled onto it. So just to do a little comparison here, this is essentially what I look like right now. 35k max hit on the dot, which is pretty nice. Really easy to hang on to that number mentally, but we'll just say 35,000 max hit. Now, obviously, we would put some other sort of flask in there, but we're just going to simulate swapping from the current Topaz Flask to the new Topaz Flask. So that would mean, this is why I put in the 10,000 light res, right? So I'm not bothering about worrying that I have enough light res. This would mean that instead of 75 max light res, my max light res would be 88%. And as we can see, it drops from 35k to 33,613. So 35k on the dot divided by 33613. This is about a 4% reduction in Fizz max hit. That's not as bad as I feared. That's really not that terrible. I can live with that. 4% less Fizz max hit, that's not enough of a nerf to feel like I need to start rethinking the build. I'm okay. Now the max lightning hit, on the other hand, is quite a bit more substantial. Like if we compare this is 82121, 82121. All right. And now let's reset that config. So again, instead of having the 88 max light res, we're back to 75, but we're still using the current Topaz flask. All right, 95k 637 lightning max hit. 95637. This is about 15% more elemental damage taken for all of these Pathfinder builds that were previously running some sort of elemental resistance flasks. Now, this is assuming you're doing everything you possibly could to maximize the impact of flask. This is like, I specifically chose this because I thought it would be the most extreme, the largest level of contradictions between the two ends. You know, I'm running a Mage Blood, I'm enkindling everything, I'm using the prefixes that increase effect, I'm using Pathfinder, obviously, I'm taking all of these little extra flask effect nodes. So everything is being multiplied, and the difference between the best and worst case scenario is being maximized across the board. I'm using Alchemist Genius, counting Alchemist Genius as being on, all of that stuff. I think 4% Fizz max hit, I think that difference is so small that you won't really notice it in a softcore type of situation, softcore trade league like I like to play. I think it's going to be completely fine. Taking 15% more elemental damage, that is a bit more significant, and I think that this probably is going to result in a reduction in the number of people using the tri-elemental resist flask approach. I think that the approach that I've been taking is kind of ahead of the curve here, frankly. Converting a lot of damage taken into a specific type into lightning, 69% Fizz taken as lightning. Feel pretty good about that. And then running just the one flask to really emphasize that, like, that kind of elemental resistance specifically. I think that really, really works. Now, if there were some way that I could get even more flask effect and actually get that number up to 14%, obviously I would need to take off the flask, so I'm not double dipping here. But if I were able to get that up to 14%, we're talking about a difference of like 34253 divided by 35k on the Fizz max hit, less than 3%, 2.5%. For everything that is not operating at this much flask effect, I think the difference in the two ends, the difference between, you know, the before and after, is not really going to be that huge. So I don't think that this will actually wind up being like build ruining or anything along those lines. I think it just makes it so that it's a little bit less overpowered. It probably opens up some more options. Like I've been thinking about, instead of running a Topaz flask, maybe just fixing my resists on the gear, not thinking about running a Topaz flask and just doing something else like a Jade flask or a Sulfur flask or something for more damage, and just going that route. And I think that might actually be a real approach. I think that might be an option that has been created because of this set of nerfs here. All right, there is one other change in here that I found kind of funny, but it is something that they had to do, so I'll just like roll the clip and let him talk about it.
The craft that upgrades an amulet to a talisman has instead been moved to Bestiary League. Since the captured monsters in Bestiary can be traded, you can now trade for the amulet craft at your leisure.
Okay, so yeah, converting an amulet into a talisman's now a beast craft. It's itemized. I mean, this is super awesome for both of the people who care about talismans. I have this memory of Grinding Gear saying they were going to continually sunset old League mechanics and replace them with new ones as part of like a consistent ongoing process. I remember them saying this around the time that they removed Prophecy League from the game, and I guess I just always thought that that would mean they would remove talismans at some point as well, but that hasn't happened. Other than them replacing Metamorph with Ultimatum, I really don't remember them doing anything else along those lines over the years. Did I imagine this? Is it real? I don't know. Either way, this new league looks like it's going to be insane, and we haven't even seen anything about the league content itself yet. All right, I think that about covers it. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. Bye.